Good afternoon, and welcome to Back to School in the New Normal, a survival guide webinar presented by Healthy Connections. This is the latest in our series of survival guide webinars designed to help families and caregivers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Previous presentations in our survival guide series include physical distancing with children and grandchildren, how to encourage academic, social, and emotional engagement of school-age children and teens, and mindfulness during a crisis, a survival guide. You can check out those archived webinars on our website at www.healthyconnectionswv.org. Today's survival guide webinar topic is Back to School in the New Normal. We're going to hear from three keynote presenters during today's presentation, including Conrae Lucas-Adkins, who is Assistant Professor at the Marshall University School of Psychology, College of Education and Professional Development, Sandra Stroebel, who is Associate Dean and Professor at the Marshall Department of School Psychology, College of Education and Professional Development, and Jennifer Tiano, who is a professor with Marshall University's Department of Psychology. You'll have the ability to submit your questions or feedback to our keynote presenters at any time during today's presentation. Simply use the Q&A player in your WebEx browser. If you don't see that, we'll show you some visual cues a little later in the presentation so that you can interact with our team of presenters today. In addition to our three keynote presenters from Marshall University, today's session is being emceed by me, Shanon Wright. I'm Director of Innovation for Quality Insights. Our Q&A portion coming up later in the webinar will be facilitated by our lead project coordinator, Crystal Welch, and producing today's webinar is Misty Dyke, a communication specialist also with Quality Insights. If you're new to this arena and you're not familiar with the Healthy Connections Coalition, it's a group of Huntington area agencies that work together to help pregnant women, mothers, and their families navigate treatment and support services available in the Huntington, West Virginia area. Quality Insights, who's producing today's webinar, is one of the largest nonprofit organizations devoted to improving healthcare quality in the United States. We use data and community solutions to achieve the goals of better care, smarter spending, and healthier people. Our 300-plus employees and consultants with expertise in healthcare delivery, continuous quality improvement, medical record abstraction, data analysis, information technology, social marketing, and more are all unified by our mission to bring people and information together to improve health, which is exactly what we do with Healthy Connections. We at Quality Insights are proud to be in charge of Healthy Connections marketing, branding, web infrastructure development, partnership coordination, resource creation, earned media generation, advertising, and production of webinars, just like today's Survival Guide webinar. And here are our three presenters that you'll be hearing from today. Conrae Lucas-Adkins is an assistant professor in the Department of School Psychology at Marshall University and a licensed school psychologist. She currently serves as the West Virginia delegate to the National Association of School Psychologists and is a member of the Cross-State Collaborative to support schools in the opioid crisis. Sandra Sterrett is an Associate Dean for the College of Education and Professional Development. She teaches in the School Psychology program at Marshall University. She's a licensed psychologist and a school psychologist. She provides counseling services at Bible Center Church. Her research interest is mental health of children and adolescents. Jennifer Tiano is a professor in the Department of Psychology at Marshall University. She earned her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in clinical child psychology from West Virginia University. She is a Parent-Child Interaction Therapy International Certified Level 1 trainer and is certified in Levels 1 and 2 of Positive Parenting Program, or Triple P. Her clinical and research interests include young children with disruptive behaviors, parent training, behavior management, and classroom behavior management and teacher training. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to turn over today's presentation to Jennifer Tiano for back to school, younger children. Jennifer?
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to be presenting on this topic to you all. I will be presenting on younger children, getting them back to the new normal and back to school, which I'm unable to move the slides forward.
Take your mouse and click on the slide first, and then you should be able to use your page down key.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh.
So starting the conversation about COVID-19, there's a lot going on in the media. The children are seeing things. And as parents, we're really sitting wondering, how do we even get started talking to our young children about such a difficult and complex topic? So first of all, as parents, what we need to do, ask children what they have heard. So what is their information thus far on COVID-19 and their understanding of the disease, and then asking them how they feel about what they have heard and what they know. When you ask them how they feel, make sure that you're sharing only information that the children need to know, so not going in depth and creating more anxiety for the children. Also answering them honestly and in their own words, so making sure that the conversations that you have with your children are in 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old terms. They're developmentally appropriate so the children are understanding. And the information that you provide to them not only should be developmentally appropriate, but also truthful and appropriate information. What else can parents do? One thing that we can do in a time of such madness is to model calmness ourselves. So children tend to mirror the emotions that they see parents exhibit. So if parents become very anxious, it makes children upset, and they often become anxious. If parents are modeling anger, the children are usually exhibiting symptoms of anger as well. So it's very important that parents model calmness when talking about and dealing with things related to COVID and getting back to this new normal. It's also important to maintain as much normalcy as you can with the children. So keeping a schedule, even if your child is doing the virtual learning or the e-learning, the homeschooling, making sure that they have a schedule that they can follow, that they get up at a certain time, that they're doing their schooling at a certain time every day, lunches at the same time, extra reading is at a certain time. And so really maintaining a schedule to show some kind of normalcy and balance in their days. You can even, as a parent, make a visual schedule, like what's on the slide, so that the children can understand what their day is going to look like and what comes next. It's really important as parents to listen actively to our children. So when our children are asking questions or seem like something's bothering them, it's very important to make yourself available to listen to them and talk. So this means giving them your full attention, turning the phones off, putting the phones down, turning the TV off, sitting on the child's level, so getting down and sitting face to face instead of hovering over top of them, and just making sure that you're listening to what they're saying and you reflect back what they are saying and feeling to make sure that you understand what they're saying. So, for example, reflecting back what the child is feeling and saying might look something like, what I'm hearing you say is that you are scared to go back to school because you don't like wearing masks. Is that right? And so reflecting back what the child is saying, and if you are incorrect in what the child is saying, he or she will correct you. They will have no problems doing that. They will correct you and say, no, what I really meant was, and then they will tell you. But reflecting back what you're hearing them saying and reflecting back how they are feeling is going to make sure they know you have heard them and you understand what they're saying. That will make them feel more comfortable coming to you and talking to you about these things that bother them. Also, when giving them your full attention, you want to acknowledge and validate their feelings. We don't necessarily have to agree with those feelings, and we may not fully understand those 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old feelings, but what we do need to do is just let them know that we hear what they're saying, and we're not going to tell them how to feel or not, how not to feel. So avoid saying things like, you shouldn't be scared, or don't think that way. That's not how it's going to be. Instead, you could say, I understand how going back to school might be a little scary for you. However, and then you can talk about other things to do with going back to school. However, we're going to make sure that you wear a mask. The school is going to make sure that everything is clean. So not telling them how not to feel, just validating, I understand that you feel this way. You're not agreeing with it. You're just acknowledging it. This can also increase their sense of calmness because they know you understand where they're coming from, and they're not going to feel judged by how you approach it. It can also help them process these emotions and be able to put these emotions into words, which can be difficult, especially for younger children, because emotions are very abstract concepts that they can't hold in their hands, and they can't see them, and they can't, visually manipulate them. And so putting their emotions into words can be difficult for these young children. And as parents, what we can do is put these emotions to words to help these children so that in the future they should be able to learn to put those emotions into words as well. You also want to make sure that you are monitoring what the children see and hear. There's a lot of stuff coming across the TV, and it's usually pretty gloom and doom. So making sure, especially if you have a child who tends to be a little bit more prone to worry and anxiety, monitoring what that child sees on TV can be very important. You want to offer reassurance to the child. So share how you deal with your own feelings. Sometimes when I get scared, it helps me to talk to somebody. And after I do that, I tend to feel a little bit better. So sharing with them how you deal with those kinds of emotions. Teaching them appropriate ways to deal with big emotions. I understand that you're angry right now, but it's not okay to hurt when you're angry. Let's take some deep breaths. So teaching them more appropriate ways to deal with those big emotions that they are having, reassuring them that they are safe, and then going over ways that they can stay safe. So you're safe right now, and here are ways that you can continue to be safe. So all of those things that we have been hearing so much about recently, the washing of the hands, social distancing, wearing a mask, and for young children, avoid sharing toys, making sure that they're not sharing toys with other children. There are numerous resources available for these kinds of things on the online on the internet. So this is one example of a social story about wearing a mask. And this social story is laid out on paper, but in some of my resources, you can also access this social story where it comes up like a slideshow, which is really, really a cool thing to go through. And so what this social story about wearing a mask does is it tells about some of the things of COVID and how to wear a mask and some other ways to keep yourself safe, but in developmentally appropriate ways, so with very young children. So it goes through what COVID is. It talks about wearing a mask and practicing wearing a mask and how do you wear a mask, what it looks like, how you put it on, helping others put on masks, social distancing, washing your hands, and then taking off the mask. So this shows a way to go through this with children with words, but also with pictures so that they can understand what's going to be expected of them to keep themselves safe. And one other thing that we can do as parents is very, very important, not just with dealing with the COVID information and going back to school, but on a daily basis for children, is giving them lots of encouragement, lots of praise. We want to make sure that we are praising things like putting their mask on, remembering their mask, washing their hands, social distancing. So if those are the kinds of behaviors that we want to see, we need to make sure that we're giving a lot of attention and a lot of praise to those specific behaviors, because any behaviors that we give a lot of attention to through praise, we're going to see increase. The praise should also be given immediately following the behavior. If we wait too long to tell them what they did that we liked, they're not going to make that association between receiving the praise and the specific behavior that brought about the change. So brought about the praise, I'm sorry. So we want to make sure that that praise immediately follows the behavior that we like, and we praise it very frequently. The praise should be labeled and very specific. So instead of saying good job, which would leave it up to the child's interpretation of which behavior you thought was good, we want to take those praises like good job, I like that, fantastic, wow, awesome, I'm proud of you, and we want to tag the specific behavior onto the end of that so that the child knows exactly what he or she did that made you happy. So instead of saying good job, you might say something like good job of putting your mask on. Instead of saying I'm proud of you for remembering to stay 6 feet back from the person in front of you. So giving those very specific kinds of praises. Another thing we can do as parents is to spend one-on-one time with our child daily. So this can be as short as 5 minutes of undivided attention from you as the parent in a very positive interaction. So if they've had a very stressful, difficult day, this is almost like a short mini play therapy repair session. So you're spending 5 minutes playing with whatever toy or toys that your child wants to play with. You're giving them your undivided attention for 5 minutes of time, and you're telling them all of the things you like about them, all of the things that you like that they're building or drawing or saying. And so you're just keeping it all positive and having a really, really great positive interaction with your child to help end the day with them. And that can be done actually any time of day. It can be done after dinner. It can be done before bed. It can be done first thing in the morning. And you can do several 5-minute sessions a day with your child if you like. But it's just about getting that positive one-on-one undivided attention from the parent where they're hearing lots of great things about themselves. Okay, I am going to pass it over to Dr. Sandra Stroebel.
Thank you, Dr. Tiano. I am going to be talking about older elementary and middle school students and how we can best prepare them. And we do know, here we go. I'm trying to get my slide to advance, and I'm having a little trouble.
I can jump in there, Sandra, and advance those for you.
Thanks so much. All right, and so this is back to school, the new normal for older elementary and middle school, as I said. Next slide, please. What we found is that children do if they're provided with information about what to expect. So you as a parent need to find out all you can about what the school year will look like. One way you can begin to establish a partnership is by reaching out to your child's teachers via email prior to the start of school to introduce yourself and your child and initiate that collaborative relationship. Contacting the teacher will reduce your feelings of anxiety and provide a way for you to express any concerns you may have about the upcoming school year. And just like you would maybe take your child to visit the school before school starts, this is a way to have an interaction with the teacher before school starts. Don't hesitate to contact the teacher, but do be patient, waiting for the response. Teachers are really busy getting ready for the school year. Try also to attend any school activities or meetings that are being held. Many more of those are going to be virtual, so it'll be easier to attend. You want to stay as informed and connected as you can. So try to ask questions of the teacher, of the school, to get as much detail as you can. So if your child's going face-to-face, ask about what happens if your child does get sick. Or what happens if someone else is diagnosed with COVID-19 in a school? Ask about logistics, such as how will your child get water? Because lots of times the water fountains now are prohibited. So do you need to pack a water bottle? At lunchtime, what will be happening? Will they be in their room? Will they be in the cafeteria? Where will PE be? Will they even have PE? If you're driving them to school, ask if there's new drop-off or pickup procedures. If the child's riding the bus, ask what will be different. What would that look like? For virtual school options, if you're doing it online, find out if there's going to be live video instruction by the teachers or if they're going to watch pre-recorded videos and just receive some accompanying assignments. If your child has been receiving speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, tutoring, or other related services from the school, ask how these services will continue during the virtual at-home learning. If your child has an individualized education plan or 504 plan or receives other learning support, ask how your school will continue to provide these. And then check if there's any mental health services in place in case your child starts to develop problems during COVID-19. If so, you want to know who the point of contact is at the school so that you can get these services throughout the year. And also just a way to keep in touch. Ask if your school is going to offer virtual or socially distanced physical activity. Perhaps they'll do videos where the kids get together and do dances and things over Zoom. But if not, you need to really figure out a way to add some physical activity to your child's daily routine. We don't want kids that are just on screens all day long. Also ask about any plans to support school connectedness. You want your child to be able to be connected to classmates and to the teacher. And so figuring out how that's going to happen. Do it collaboratively with the teacher, but if the teacher doesn't do it, be proactive and set up some virtual times. Your child can play games with friends over Zoom or just have a chance to chat. Next slide, please. So the reason it's so important for you to get all this information is so then you can tell it to your child. And kids just feel less anxious and less stressed if they know what to expect. This is very reassuring for them. So you're going to then want to share all these details. Kids thrive on certainty and stability and structure. So you want to talk to them. Well, how's the classroom going to look differently? Are the desks going to be far apart? Will the teacher be standing from a distance? Where will they be at lunchtime? What, will recess look like? Are there going to be any clubs available to them? They need to know how to access the supports they're used to getting, like tutoring or counseling. And then try to practice ahead of time some different scenarios about what they might encounter. This helps give them a sense of control. So if you walk through these specifics, it can give them something concrete to hold on to. It just makes it easier when they do encounter them. So when they see their friends and they want to run up and hug them, think about how a different fun greeting you can do. Maybe they could do air high fives or air hugs or tapping their feet together. But talk about that and give them some ideas. Also, talk to them about how to handle problems. Try to think about that in advance. So if they see kids that are not being safe and they don't feel safe, the other kids aren't following the rules, what should they do? What if they see someone that's getting too close to them, or if they see someone not wearing a mask? They should always know they can talk to you or a teacher about those problems, but tell them not to be rude. I know all of us at times have gotten frustrated when we've been out in public and someone doesn't have a mask on. We don't want our kids to go through that angst. We want to talk to them that maybe there's a medical reason that child doesn't have a mask, but there's something they can do. They can talk to someone. And if it's a friend, they might just jokingly say, hey, where's your mask? But if it's someone that they don't really know, an acquaintance, it's better to let the teacher handle that. But reinforce to them that by following the rules, they are doing something really important. They're keeping themselves safe, they're keeping their family safe, they're keeping other people at school safe. And that'll give them something tangible they can do in this time of uncertainty. There's so much out of their control, but that's something they can control. They can wear their mask, they can keep their distance, they can wash their hands. So that gives them some empowerment, knowing that they can control some things in their life. And that sense of control reduces fear. So while it's hard to tell your kids you don't know what will happen, because I've said try to tell them as much as you can, but there's some things that you just won't know. You won't know that perhaps they'll get back to school and in 2 weeks they'll have to go home again and do virtual learning. It's okay to be realistic with them. You need to be honest. It's okay to say, I don't know for sure, but this is what we think. And so children sometimes, as Dr. Tiano was telling you, may have these thoughts in their heads that you don't even know. And so you want to, be there to communicate, to offer information that's accurate, but you'd like to know if they have some misinformation or if there's some incorrect stuff that they've heard. And so it's important for you to ask questions or really listen when they are talking so that you can correct those misperceptions. And then you also want to tell them that, there's a lot of smart people out there working to try to correct the problem, and you have hope that things will get better and that we're all working together. And it's okay to point out the need to be flexible because the future is unknown. And tell them that it's really a good thing to develop that flexibility. That really helps them prepare for the future. And talk about maybe a time that they had to encounter something and be flexible, such as when they, if they've ever had to move to a new house or go to a new school, or if the parents were ever divorced. That's a big change in their lives, and say, hey, you did okay with that. I know that you can get through this too. We can get through this together. Or maybe there's some loss they've had in their lives, and you said, hey, you got through that. I know you can get through this too. So those are some things to encourage them with. And then that gradual return to school schedule bedtime will just be helpful, because we do know that when kids are well rested and well fed, that they function better. They cope with stress better. So we want to make sure. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder to help them really know the way that they need to wear their mask, that the mask needs to cover their nose and their mouth. It needs to be around their ears. It should be fit snugly but comfortably. And if they touch their face, they should wash their hands. If they touch their mask, they should wash their hands or use hand sanitizer. The masks should have multiple layers. You should have some backup so you can wash them. And that it's not a bad idea to put your name on the mask and permanent marker, because you can see kids forgetting, taking their mask off. Maybe somebody else's is near theirs. Even though they're supposed to wear them all the time, things could happen when they're at school. And so you want to make sure they get the right one back on their face, the one that they brought. And it's a good idea to practice a routine of wearing a mask around the house before they go to school. Some children are going to be asked to wear a mask for 6 to 7 hours a day, and to go from not wearing it at all to wearing it for that long will be hard for them. And so maybe practicing so they get used to it. Next slide, please. So if your child is doing a combination of face-to-face and distance learning, you're going to need 2 different schedules for home learning and school learning, because some schools have it set up that way. And it's, as Dr. Tiano was talking about, a schedule is really helpful. And if you can make the routine similar in those 2 days, that'll make it easier for kids too. But there can be some variety, just like we don't do the same thing on weekends we do on weekdays. But we want to make it as easy for them as possible to have that structure and that routine. And so asking the teacher, what's the flow of a typical day? And what are the materials my child will need to have? You want to help that child get into that routine so they can be as independent as they can be, as independent as they were maybe during school. So create that schedule with your child. Create it together. We get more agreement when we work together on it. And structure and routine will help them not get behind in assignments. And so you come up with a family schedule for learning and instruction, but you want to make sure you have some family time there and some physical activity maybe some walks outside. It's nice if you can do some visuals, a family calendar to keep track of deadlines and assignments. And make sure you schedule some time during the day where there are no screens. These kids are going to be on screens a lot that are learning from home or doing the hybrid approach, and we just want to give them a break from that. When you think about their workspace, be good if it could be a quiet workspace, but you need to experiment what will work best for them. So it could be a separate room, or it could be a portion of a shared space, or maybe it's where everybody is, but they have on noise-canceling headphones. But try to reduce the distractions, the noise, the clutter, and make sure it's well lit. And if they're sharing a space, it would be nice for each child to personalize their own area, decorating it, making it their own, and the decorations with the cardboard could help with like a privacy screen. And also have a designated spot, crates of school supplies that has everything they might need, so they're not running to you saying, I need this, I need that. They know where it is, they can be more independent, they can go get their supplies when they need them. Make sure before school starts that you have that reliable internet connection. And with that internet connection, our kids are going to be on the internet where we know they can have access to so many things. It's important to have discussions about there are some places on the internet that are not good sites, and you need to talk to your kids about that. You want them to feel that they can come to you if they accidentally stumble onto something. I do counseling, and I talk with kids who say, oh yeah, somebody told me to check this website out, and it was really bad. We want to make sure our kids are letting us know that. And we also want to have some parental controls. We want to be looking at the history, making sure they're on the sites they need to be. And then you want to confirm that the child's tablet or laptop is working, has the platforms on there that need to be, whether it's Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is they need in order to connect with the school. And then if you could take some time to explore the websites or programs with the child together so the child feels more comfortable doing it on their own. And you make sure that, if you have passwords, that you make a list and put it somewhere safe, and they know where to look for them. Next slide, please. As Dr. Tiano was talking about, that we as adults need to model the calm coping strategies. We are the ones that kids look to see, hey, is everything okay? They look to us for guidance on how to react to all this stress in our lives. And it's okay to say you're concerned too, or you're worried too. I mean, it validates that, hey, we're in a difficult time. That's okay. But you don't want to be panicking. You don't want to be freaking out. You don't want to be listing every negative thing that could be happening, or tell your child you're just so worried they're going to go to school, get sick, come home, make grandma and grandpa sick. We just don't need to pile all that worry on them. We can talk about, it is a scary time, but we're doing all we can to be safe, and you are really helping out by wearing your mask, washing your hands, keeping distance, focusing instead on what they are doing, the positive preventative measures, instead of all the fears of what if, what if, what if. Again, it's that control. And this is a tremendous opportunity for us to model our problem solving, talking with them together, if problems happen during the day, how to handle it, talking to them again about flexibility, and then compassion. We're all doing our best. We all can't be perfect. Mom and Dad are trying to work and help you with your schoolwork, and we're all working together. But let's, choose kindness when we're talking with one another. And you may need to be creative about how you do spend time together and how you connect with others. And, we really don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. And again, that's where that flexibility comes, asking them to be flexible. While we might expect and really hope for one thing, such as going back to class, it might not happen, and that's okay. We're going to get through this. It's going to be all right. We want to be hopeful and positive with our kids. And it's important to even list for them what are some of the positives of going back. So if they're going and they're feeling a little anxious, which you say is sure, that's really, really normal. You want to normalize those emotions. But if you say, oh, you get to see your friends and your teacher, and whatever positives that you can think about that they like to do at school. Maybe there's some special supplies the art teacher has that can be comforting for them. If they're learning online, talking about positives like, oh, you don't have to spend any time on that school bus. You just get up in the morning and eat your breakfast and you're there. And also say, hey, and then we can take a midday walk together. Won't that be cool? So focusing on that positive. But I want you to watch for and anticipate any behavior changes. Like if you see excessive crying or irritation, excessive worry, sadness, unhealthy eating or sleeping habits, if they have difficulty concentrating, these all might be signs that your child's struggling with stress and anxiety. And most children are going to manage well with the support of you and other family members, even if they have a little worry or some concerns. They might have a little trouble sleeping or concentrating, but some children have higher risk factors. Maybe they've had anxiety before or depression, maybe even some suicidal thoughts. Maybe there are some pre-existing mental health problems. Maybe there's been some abuse, some family instability. Maybe they've recently lost a loved one. These children are more at risk and should be monitored more closely. And you should not hesitate to contact a professional if they're exhibiting any significant changes in behavior that last for more than 2 weeks. But again, keep that communication open. Talk to your child about school and figure out what's comfortable for them in terms of talking. Some kids like to, be like fidgeting with things while they're talking, maybe some blocks or doing a puzzle together or washing dishes together. But other kids want to sit one-on-one. So figure out what's comfortable for them. But don't talk to them while they're on a screen because they're probably then not listening to what you're having to say. So again, as Dr. Tiano said, they may be absorbing some scary information, so let their questions guide you. Next slide. And finally, don't forget those social connections. Social distancing is not social isolation. Don't let your kids be isolated from everyone. Be creative. Think of a way to make a connection, whatever you can. Even if they're writing notes for the teacher you take pictures of and send, or emailing people, and make sure that you have some separate family time. Don't have everything about school. When you work from home, the work can just take over your whole life. Don't let school take over your whole life. Have some fun time too. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Dr. Lucas.
Thank you, Dr. Stroebel and Dr. Tiano. I'm going to make sure I can manipulate the screen. Let's see, Misty, I might need some help from you.
All right, I can jump in there.
Okay.
Not
Thank
playing
you.
nice today.
So, as I was putting together resources for this talk and just reflecting on, what's happening, I found myself saying, maybe I have more questions than answers. I wanted to approach this as a mom, of teenagers and a soon-to-be teenager, as well as a school psychologist. So as a mom of a teenager and an almost teen, I just feel like there are these endless sets of questions that I can't answer. Kind of reminds me when they were toddlers and they ask all those why questions. But now it seems I have more of this urgency to offer them some certainty. I want to give them some things that they can count on. So, my tips and suggestions that I'm going to talk with you about really come from personal experiences as a mom and how I've tried to incorporate a little of my training as a school psychologist into my day-to-day parenting. But I can tell you that this is certainly not easy for me to implement, and I found it much easier to talk about it than to do it. But, I'm just hopeful that, with my sincere love, for my kids and, coupled with some of my professional training, that I'll get them on the right path. So I hope that through this discussion, there are some resources and things that you're able to find helpful for you. So with this slide, what I thought I would do is actually give you an idea of some of the questions that I'm hearing. And these are some questions from my 16-year-old daughter and some of her same-age friends. Things like, what about the homecoming dance? What about the prom? Asking me who's really in charge of all these decisions. Who's going to make the decision that we go to virtual school or not? And when are we going to get some certainty? And then also questions about just her future. Saying things like, well, what if I didn't learn enough? I've got to take the ACT and the SAT this year. What if I don't have enough knowledge to do well on those? What's that going to do for my chances of getting into college? So next slide. So these are some questions from the mouth of my 12-year-old, who will be 13 in just a month. He's a basketball player, so of course he's asking about, are we going to have basketball season this year? He's also asking about, what about, if I have to stay with one group of kids when I am at school in one classroom? What if I don't have classes with all my friends? What if we have lunch in our room? That's going to be pretty boring. And then also he's even asking about, well, I don't think I learned a whole lot last year. And he said, do you think that my teachers will review some of the stuff that we were supposed to have learned? So, I just want to share those questions because I struggle, as a mom with providing answers. And at first, when I hear some of those questions, I think, wow, that can be superficial, for example, the prom and basketball season. But, given the developmental ages and stages that my children are in, these are very central to what they're living right now. These are very important things to them. So my first inclination might be just to disregard the importance of what they're asking. I have to step back and see it from their perspective. So, thinking about prom and being 16, that's very important. And I'm pleased that my daughter's thinking about the ACT and the SAT. That shows me that she's future-oriented and, she is thinking about, attending college. And then with my son, when he's asking questions about the vaccine, I'm thinking, wow, this might be my opportunity to talk to him about future careers, exploring science and being able to, develop vaccines for other things, when he is older. So, trying to make the positive out of some of these questions that I struggle with as a mom. Next slide. So in my first presentation with Healthy Connections, I talked about communication with teenagers during the best and the worst of times. So as Dr. Tiano and Dr. Stroebel have talked about, it's really essential for us as parents to acknowledge the feelings and the perspectives of our kids, validate that the issues are very real to them at this stage in their life, trying to put ourselves in their shoes, and then accepting. And accepting doesn't mean that I agree, with the things that my child is saying, but it's showing them that I'm not disputing their position or I'm not dismissing their feelings. So, I work to meet them where they are and then join them together to try to solve the problems. And then, in the bottom box there, the 3 R's. It's my probably one of my favorite things to talk about, but the 3 R's with regard to communication. So reframing, gently guiding kids to see things from the perspective of another. As Dr. Stroebel said, this is a tough time, but what are some positives? What are some things about the situation that can be thought of in a more positive light? And then refocus. I think it's quite easy for me and for others to be a problem admirer, meaning that we talk about the problem and, we talk about how bad it is. But with refocusing, I think we need to refocus our energies and efforts on looking for solutions to those problems. And then the last R is reinforcing. So I think it's very important, and Dr. Tiano talked about this with the younger kids, but when we see our children, when we see our teens implementing healthy coping, and when we hear them talking about things in a more positive light, we need to acknowledge that, and we need to reinforce their actions. Next slide, please. So these are just continued tips for communication. Some have been talked about by the other presenters. One key tip from this slide that I had to remind myself of is to create space for discussions. I told you that I have this urgency to give them the right answers. So now I have to make sure that I make a concerted effort to not talk sometimes and to be honest with them about not having all the answers. I found some specific information about conversations regarding COVID-19 with teenagers and young adults, and so I have the resource for you at the bottom. And this resource actually gives you some examples, concrete examples of conversation starters and ways of phrasing questions when you are talking with teenagers and young adults. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of, turning the table in a sense, a way of refocusing teens on solutions and proactive ways of handling what's happening in our world. Maybe a way to empower them to see themselves as active contributors to solutions and not merely victims of, these unfortunate circumstances that we're facing. So, saying to your child, what are some ideas about how we could transition back to school safely? What are some ideas that you and your friends have about scheduling dances and other social connections for the school year? And then what are some ways that you learn best? Both of my kids have talked about virtual learning not being something that they like, but it's also something that they are not accustomed to. So, I try to get them to talk about, what are some things that are helpful to them when they are learning new things in school. And so another resource I provided for you there from ChildMind, and it also gives you some additional conversation starters and some concrete things regarding preparing the teenagers for the reopening of schools. Next slide, please. This is just an infographic. This is from teenmentalhealth.org, and it's very related to our topic today. One thing that jumps out at me and I want to draw your attention to is the fourth tip that talks about checking your child's thinking. So the suggestion here is to use open-ended questions to encourage discussion. And I really, have kind of held on to this tip. Of course, I'm trying not to overwhelm my kids with questions because I tend to talk a lot. But what I'm thinking about with this particular tip is working on building my children's critical thinking skills and fostering their resilience as a result of these current circumstances. So next slide. And so this is just a reminder to me, and I think it's important to keep my focus on these things, that my job as a parent is to help my children grow. And right now, I want to help them be resilient and be good critical thinkers. And that kind of goes back to those 3 R's, reframing and refocusing and reinforcing. Next slide. With this slide, there are some concrete examples of how adults, parents can encourage their teens to, become critical thinkers and, be resilient as a result of what's happening. One example from me, as a parent, what I'm really trying to encourage my kids to do is to consider the sources of the information that they are receiving about COVID-19 and about school. I'm trying to encourage them to seek out information from credible sources and discern those from messages that might be intended for other purposes, ulterior motives than the promotion of health and well-being. Last activity on the slide, I talked with you about using this time to have my kids think about career opportunities. So, of course, we talk about the careers in science and the medical field, but I'm also talking to them about virtual communication and technology because, wow, they are living in a time of change and definitely seeing the use of technology for social connection, learning, and things like that. Okay, next slide. Here's another infographic, and this infographic supports the consumption of facts as opposed to relying on misinformation. So it's just another nice picture of some steps that we can take to make sure our kids get the facts. Next slide. So with this particular slide, I'm so thankful that Misty was able to put the reference at the bottom of the slide because I just personally found this slide to be, or this resource to be extremely helpful. It provides examples of how to use social media, texting and Twitter and all those things to communicate facts and accurate information about COVID-19. So there are some concrete examples that are given. So there are 30 tips to messaging about COVID-19 that I found to be just a safe way and a good way to encourage my kids to communicate the right things. Okay, next slide. Here's an example. This is just a publication, just a reminder for us to consider the sources of information. And I have the reference for this full article at the end on my reference slide. Next slide. And this, I found this as a resource that could be helpful for parents or teachers. And as you can see, there are actually tabs. If you go to the site, if you are a teacher and you want to use this as a teaching tool, or if you're a parent and you want to use this to reinforce some learning in your home. But this is a way that kids can learn to check their facts. So they're checking the sources to verify the accuracy of the online information that they are receiving. Okay, next slide. And these are my references. So there were a few that I had embedded in the earlier slides, but here are some that I have found to be beneficial to me. So that's all that I had for you. I appreciate your attention. And again, I hope that there were some tips and things that I shared with you that you're able to find helpful and implement in your own family.
Thanks so much, Conrae. Great information. I see we've already got some questions coming in through the Q&A box on the WebEx player. If you don't know where that is, simply hover over the bottom of your screen, look for the 3 dots and the circle, and you can bring it up now. At this point, I'm going to turn over the Q&A portion of today's presentation to Crystal Welch. Crystal?
Oh, thank you, Shannon. And you're right, we do have several questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the next 6 minutes. So right off the bat, we have a question. Do you have strategies available for the times when there is no set plan after you've gone through the plans and scenarios dealing with self-anxiety?
This is Conrae. I hope you can hear me. Kim, I appreciate that question. I saw you chat that in. And I will, say to you that, I tried to, implement things like mindfulness activities, with my kids, my older kids, yoga and just some self-calming things. And I guess really, I just talk with them about, the importance of communicating, with me about their feelings and trying to help them problem solve and recognize that there are some things that are truly not within our control right now.
Thank you. Our next question says, parents have ingrained their children not to be selfish and to always share their food, their school supplies, share a hug. Can you model an example of how we should talk to our children right now about sharing?
I think that's a great question. Actually, this is Jennifer Tiano. I think that is a great question because we do want children to share. And now we're telling them the exact opposite. Keep everything to yourself. Keep everything to yourself. I think if we can reinforce sharing in other capacities, at home, with siblings, with family members, things like that, I think that will help keep the idea of sharing fresh in the child's mind. You can talk about how, some of the reasons why we don't want to share at school. So I like that you really want to give cookies to Carmen because she didn't bring any. But, the rules now because of what's going on is you can't share your food. But there are other things that you can share with Carmen. You can share a smile. You can share a story about what happened at school that day with you. So there are other things that you can share that do not require physical objects or touching. And so I would come up with different other things, various other things that could be quote unquote shared as opposed to the more physical sharing of items and bodily contact.
Thank you very much. We have another question. I have older parents at home, and I'm fearful of them contracting the virus. My young kids pick up on my emotions about COVID, even though I'm trying not to share detailed information to keep their fears down. I sense they pick me up on my being vigilant at times. Can you repeat the example of modeling calmness while yet being firm?
This is Jennifer. I think that was directed towards my presentation when I talked about modeling calmness. Absolutely. So I think whoever the question came from, it's great that you are so aware and in tune with your children's feelings and emotions that you're picking up on some of that stuff, that they're picking up on what's coming from you. And so that's fantastic. First of all, I want to say that you're able to pick up on those things. But I think just having a frank conversation about how older individuals are a little more at risk than other folks, and we just have to make sure that we're keeping grandma and grandpa safe, and even, make a question answer sort of thing out of it. Okay, so in the next 10 seconds, tell me 3 things that you can remember of how we can keep grandma and grandpa safe, and make the interaction and the quote unquote discussion maybe more of a game. So it's still a teaching moment, but it's more in a playful kind of way that might take a little bit of that anxiety and seriousness out of it.
Great. Well, those are all the questions we have in the queue right now. I'll turn it back over to Shannon.
Thanks so much, Crystal. And with that, we will wrap up today's webinar event. Please be advised that we have an evaluation that you will be automatically directed to upon exiting today's session. If you wouldn't mind to fill that out for us, it's very helpful as we plan future sessions for the Survival Guide series brought to you by Healthy Connections. On your slide here, you have contact information for all of our presenters as well. On behalf of everyone at Healthy Connections and Quality Insights, we'd like to thank you for joining us for Back to School in the New Normal. Have a great day.